Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Steph Talks webinar. We are super excited that you are joining us today. Happy Wednesday to wherever you are tuning into. We have a great kind of part two. If you joined us for our February webinar, we're kind of piggybacking off of the same topics. We have three great speakers that will be guiding us through this webinar today. We will be recording this session, so if you have to leave, you will get a full recording of the webinar. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the question box below, and we will get to them at the end. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Amy. Really appreciate that. Everyone, I just want to say good morning to you. My name is Dave Smith, Business Unit Leader with Stefanini, and I'm joined this morning by my two distinguished guests, Craig Brown, Chief Transformation Architect and Certified Scale Agile Coach. Craig's company, Xceleon, partners with Stefanini to support our Agile squad teams. Craig, please introduce yourself.
Good morning. Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. My name is Craig Brown, as Dave just mentioned. I am the Chief Transformation Architect with Xceleon. And a little bit about my background. I am a certified SAFe professional consultant, as well as a Focus Build 2 coach in the SAP world. But I have a vast amount of experience in the application lifecycle management space, where I've helped customers throughout my career plan for, deploy, and support IT infrastructures that aligns with their business goals and visions. So hopefully my past experiences are going to come out in the presentation that we give today and help customers and help the attendees to understand how Agile in corporate America in an IT infrastructure can really help to resolve some issues that Dave is going to lay out in the very beginning.
Thank you, Craig. And I'm very, very excited that we have our Solution Center Director for Stefanini, Nikhil Desai, on with us. Nikhil's going to talk a lot about how we execute. He's got a lot of value to deliver and share with us this morning. So Nikhil, please introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me, Dave, on this webinar. Give me the opportunity to share my thoughts, experiences on the topic, which is so near, dear, close to my heart. So as Dave mentioned, my name is Nikhil Desai. I'm the Pre-Sales Director here at Solution Center. I'm responsible for all of application digital pre-sales for Stefanini North America. In my role, I engage with my customers. I help them structure their digital transformation journeys, leveraging agile principles, methods. About me, I have quite an interesting background, like a rich experience set that definitely helps me in my current role. I'm a certified lean facilitator, scrum master, have experience helping customers on lean agile transformation initiatives, helping them drive the cultural change. It's my real pleasure to be here on this panel, have a conversation with you folks, share my perspective of how we as Stefanini, we bring a lot of certainty into our squad, Scrum team driven agile execution methodology to execute, kind of mitigate a lot of execution financial risks, which I'm sure several of us on this call would be very interested to listen to. So I look forward to having a great conversation. And thank you once again for having me on this call.
Thank you, Nikhil. I really appreciate that. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started here this morning. And we're going to be talking about enhancing transformation ROI by leveraging Agile at scale. But first, we must acknowledge some of the key challenges that are faced by organizations where digital transformations are concerned, mainly the CFO and finance team. So digital transformation, what we've noticed, there's CFOs and finance teams are seeing challenges in four major areas. One being digital transformation skill disconnect. What we're noticing is that in many cases, there's high turnover in rates in these projects, resulting in continuous training and new hire costs. The other thing that we're noticing is the high technology costs, and that CFOs and finance teams are having to do more with less, but at the same time, they have to get, a return on investment, which is becoming more and more of a challenge. The other area is exorbitant innovation costs. We noticed that for every dollar of innovation identified, it costs actually $7 to execute and deliver that innovation. And then the last but not least, time to market is becoming more and more of a challenge as well. So with that being said, Craig, let me ask you, what are some of the processes that can be used to help customers mitigate, their challenges in these areas?
Sure, Dave. Thank you for that question. There are several processes that are a part of a standard industry recognized certification or process or methodology framework called the Scale Agile framework. And within that framework, if you can flip to the next slide for me, if you will, please. That framework basically has several processes that extends across the entire organization. From the portfolio level, as you are basically determining what scope you would have, and from an epic level, and the big things to do in the organization, you have processes that would allow you to, develop the scope and prioritize that scope, and track that particular scope to completion that aligns with the business. You have processes at the program level that would allow you to capture any type of features and functions that align with that same vision and bring the organization together from a technical resource perspective to basically deploy those functionalities. And finally, at the team level, where Nikhil would be very instrumental in this conversation today to talk about how Stefanini executes from an agile squad level all of the tasks and user stories, if you will, that would enable all of those particular other areas. Now, where Xceleon kind of it shines and shows its value in this strategic partnership with Stefanini is that we again take some standard processes that would be delivered in an enterprise level, and we help to determine all of the resources that are going to be required when we actually do an assessment with the organization and help them to form their value streams and also inform inform their management resources to a level to where they are really focused in on getting the actual functionality that need to align with their vision. We help the organization to take a look at those processes and look what's valuable within the organization from a functionality perspective, and then help them to adopt a lean agile way of thinking to deploy into your production environment more frequently, hence getting more value out of your IT infrastructure more frequently or early in the process, which obviously reduces those innovation costs that you spoke of, Dave. They're also, we have help the organization by helping to effectively prioritize and plan out an effective roadmap when you're looking at the technical infrastructure that is going to be required to help manage and to facilitate those functionalities. So instead of a big bang approach and grabbing at all of the technology infrastructure or components that you would need or you may not need, we do a just-in-time type infrastructure deployment where you're able to be a little more precise and a little more focused on exactly what you need opposed to an overkill. And that would allow you to reduce that technology cost that you spoke of. And finally, kind of relating to the exorbitant cost reduction for the innovation, we also help the customer to plan out the deployment of those solutions in an agile way, really aligned with a wave or a program increment deployment. which is a period of time anywhere from 3 to 4 months, for example. And so as you deploy in that level of frequency, you're able to not only experience the value a little quicker in your approach and in your projects, but you're also able to meet the demands of the project, which of course aligns with the actual program itself, or the organization and the vision itself. So if you can flip to the next slide for me, Dave. Yep. So what you'll see is that, how do we measure that? We measure the success from a safe perspective in 4 different quadrants, right? We do go over what I just talked about in terms of the time to market. So we're able to, of course, reduce the time to market and the functionality that the company needs by at least 50%. Because instead of, again, the big bang approach, which is, you're deploying in the production environment, 12, 18 months out, and then receiving all your value there, you're able to reduce that time in increment by down to 3 months in some instances, and some even more frequently. So where you would get the functionality that you need sooner than later, where your value is realized earlier. We're able to implement a continuous testing environment, which would include a robust regression testing suite, and as well as an approach that would allow you to improve your quality of the software that you would do, because you're testing so frequently at every level, from either it be the team level or the program level or the portfolio level even, when you deliver. And of course, you are able to be more productive. And you're able to be more productive because of the fact that you actually have access to the functionality, as I mentioned, more frequently and sooner in the process. And finally, you're able to engage your end users and community more heavily, because of the fact that because of the fact that you have resources that are now able to use the system as planned, opposed to having workarounds of the system because the system doesn't have the functionality that you need. Because of the fact that when we actually do the planning in the very beginning, to align with the vision of the organization and do a all-inclusive roadmap that would, again, align with that vision of the organization and the functionality needs, we're able to ensure that the end users that are utilizing the system are engaged, opposed to using outside processes or workarounds of the system to perform their jobs. They're actually utilizing the system that is the plan system that you should use, right? Any ERP, any application that is designed for the organization, this particular approach allows you to kind of plan for that and use the application effectively. Now, when you get out of that particular process or approach, you're able to save money because you are have less and potentially less of development that needs to be done that aligns more closely with the vision of the organization. You're able to improve the efficiencies because you're being focused and targeted more on the actual problem, the issues that you have, opposed to many organizations running into cultural barriers, many organizations running into issues where you would have resources that may need more training in a certain area. You're able to be more efficient because of the new approach that you're using now, which eventually leads you into the ability to stabilize the organization and grow the organization according to what's available to you from a functionality perspective.
Wow, Craig, that sounds exciting. I mean, it appears what you're saying is that Agile at scale can help customers improve value and then reduce risk on project failure. Can you elaborate on how the process really works and what the timeline looks like?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. So if you can go to the next slide for me, I'll do that in the context of how we were able to do that with Boeing, for example. So when you're talking about the first step in the process, and how that aligns with what I just went over in terms of getting to those end result numbers. The first thing that's done in an organization and what was done in Boeing is we actually did a thorough assessment. That assessment included assessing not only the technical infrastructure, but also the personnel infrastructure to ensure that they had what they needed in terms of an agile way of thinking, a lean agile way of thinking, to really be transformative, to say that I need to transform how I do business and how I align my IT infrastructure with my business. And then I need to form the resources in a way to where we are really kind of now focused on the value stream, meaning order to cash, right? And also we made sure that when we did the assessment from the technology perspective, we made sure that we took into account all of the things that the customer needed to have in place in order to manage this type of agile environment. So we were able to put all of those components in place to build a strong business case of why they needed to go this route, opposed to going the typical route of perhaps where they utilized a waterfall approach, which they ran into a lot of the issues that you called out and the 4 areas that you started with, Dave. So the assessment is extremely important. And then once we assessed it, once we showed the business case to the customer, they made a decision to deploy the Scale Agile framework in their approach to move forward with doing the transforming their business and transforming IT to where they need to utilize it and moving forward. So once that decision was made, we leveraged the infrastructure that we put in place with resources and the technology. And then we were able to begin to do a more focused approach to identifying the scope and prioritizing that scope as we came across all of the activities and all of the changes that needed to occur to their technical infrastructure to align with, again, with that vision of the organization. So doing that exercise, again, we looked at all of the processes and all of the at all the levels, portfolio, project, and team, and we were able to prioritize that work and actually put it into a format in the actual system that we had to evaluated and designed and deployed in number 2 really. So as we prepared for the environment, as we created that scope, as I mentioned, and prioritized that scope, we then had a set of priorities that now can be delivered in an agile squad or agile way, where all of the work that we did in the beginning now can be deployed in a way where the organization can really be prepared and really be aligned with the technology, so that now the company can proceed with what their goals are. So it was quite refreshing to see how the organization was able to align with that and able to adopt it, because it really helped us to accomplish some of those areas where in that 4 quadrant that I spoke about, with quality, productivity, engagement, and time to market. So all of this kind of plays together, and it was good on both sides, from our organization, Xceleon's perspective, and obviously as Boeing from their perspective as well. So much so until Boeing recommended us to SAP as a company that was able to come in, help them with some of the challenge that they were having when they were actually utilizing the waterfall approach, which is typical from PMP, and help them to transition their organization and also transition the way that they operated within an IT perspective. And we were able to, co-present with Boeing to talk about some of those successes at an ASUG annual conference event, where we were able to, have Boeing to step to the plate and talk about some of the benefits, And we were also able to talk about some of the tactical steps that we took to help get them to a place where they were, successful in their transformation. I know I talked about a lot, so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you, Craig. And the process that we spoke about as far as safe, agile processes certainly seems to provide invaluable guidance and recommended best practice to be adopted for delivering an end-to-end digital transformation initiative. However, executing these processes can be complex. I mean, cross-functional and likely demand a great deal of orchestration amongst various groups. So how does Stefanini's methodology leverage these best practices to mitigate inherent execution risks, like increase the likelihood of a successful outcome? So I guess that's the key. How do we mitigate the risk to increase the likelihood of a successful outcome? And I guess that question really goes to Nikhil.
Sure, Dave. Yep, and a very good question. It's all about risks, managing uncertainty. And if you're talking about agile or agile transformation initiatives, there's always an inherent risk at multiple levels. Risks that typically make a CFO nervous at the outset. From our perspective and taking all of those agile practices, the safe framework and everything that Craig talked about, into an execution approach that focuses to mitigate a lot of those risks, right? So again, talking about risks and just building an appreciation of what they are, let me elaborate on some of it, right? So especially if you're talking about an agile-led digital transformation, I think the risk right at the outset is the concept validation, where there's always an element of doubt and apprehension whether the digital transformation solution or the technology that you ought to leverage to address a business problem would actually be able to do so effectively, especially when you're talking technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, and I can go on and on, right? So I think the first and foremost is the concept validation at the outset, or validation risk. Craig talked about organization engagement risk. So again, how do you effectively engage the business stakeholders at the outset, build the momentum, the acceptance that's so very critical. There's time to market risks, especially in a digital transformation, and talking about enterprise agility. It's always, more often than not, for winners take all, right? It's always the first mover's advantage. So timing it right, getting your MVP out to the market at right, capturing your critical mass of the market at the right time, that's critical. So there's always that time to market risk, which if missed can significantly distort the business case that you set for yourself at the outset, right? And last but not the least, there is a scale risk, and there is a risk that kind of helps you scale, address get to your addressable market space, help reach out to your customers real time, get feedback, and more importantly, act upon that feedback in real time. So again, when you're talking about digital transformations that are set to change the way an organization works, looks, functions, I think risk mitigation is absolutely critical. Again, I can go on for multiple such risks, but let me kind of also talk about the methodology and how we are addressing through those risks, as you can see on the screen here, right? Quickly summarizing, I talked about the concept, the engage phase, the concept validation, which is all in the engage phase, right? It's kind of designed to mitigate different kind of validation risks I just talked about. A successful engage phase, right, and a concept validation at the outset, more often than not, I think it builds the conviction, the enthusiasm, the commitment that's so necessary for an organized or an enterprise to stay focused. It's also a phase that, as Craig described, kind of designed for early feedback, fail fast if you may, And I give a very interesting example, right, for one of our manufacturing client, where they're trying to explore machine learning, advanced analytics solution for real-time error detection, right, and quality analysis of a production line as as products were on the line were produced and they're kind of rolled out on the assembly line. And the objective was to kind of use machine learning, analyzing real-time images, sample, intelligence, and so on, right? But with our concept validation, we kind of found out to be technically not so much so a feasible solution. So again, a classic example. Sometimes it's important to fail fast and cut your losses. This being one of the many such, one of very few, but an important element if you're talking about risk and risk validation, or sorry, risk mitigation right at the outset. More often than not, a successful prototype gets your momentum, gets the transformation off on the right momentum, right? And then there's always accelerate, which is all about getting your velocity to the next level, building automation into your processes. And talking about scale is when you're kind of really addressing it, doing it, in real time, getting your products out, getting feedback, and so on. Also important to say that these are all different execution squads or agile squads as we talk in that progressively address a specific need of your digital transformation initiative given the phase that where it is in. So again, just to kind of giving you a big picture, you're so right. I think safe, the best practices are absolutely critical guiding force, but the execution methodology that gets you there is also absolutely critical. Like for scale, important, when you get there and when you are there, it's important that you're addressing your market, you're showing that product stewardship, and you're building that ongoing innovation, customer engagement.
So this is Nikhil. Very indeed, it's very interesting. It feels like Stefanini's methodology is designed for true organizational agility, going through the engage, accelerate, scale phases. It's likely that this approach should mitigate organizational change risks. Now, but it also we're talking about increased certainty of a successful outcome through feedback in the very initial stages. However, a methodology is only as good as it is on paper. So I guess the question I would have then is, if we're talking about this methodology, how are we going to address the agile capability so that critical to make sure that it's critical for successful outcome. So how do we address the capability, I guess is what I'm saying, so that we make sure that the outcome is successful.
Yep, and again, you bring up a real good point. I think a methodology is only as good as it is on paper, right? And the devil is in the details and how you execute it, right? You'd bet all of us on this call, we understand Agile, we understand SAFe, we understand the good practices, the lean thinking, but I'm sure all of us have had varying level of successes when it comes to Agile execution, Agile product development, different levels of successes, and so on, right? So, over the years, I think it's important, like what we've understood and what we've realized and learned is how do you structure that Agile journey, right? How do you target certain outcomes? How do you look at outcomes, incremental outcomes that set you on your maturity and your curve to be a truly performing organization or an Agile development group, if you may, right? What you see on your screen or the slide are certain outcomes, and this is a summary of our Agile transformation journey we walked through with several of our clients, right? Be it Banco do Brazil, where we have 22 plus squads operating at scale, or be it at Walmart, where we have 6 to 7 such Agile squads operating at scale, getting to the eventual high performing outcome that we're talking about, or be it Extenda Retail, be it Banco do Brazil, be it Itaú, be it Kaisha, these are certain agile transformation journeys that we've helped our customers collaborate and walk them through those different important outcomes, if you may. And again, talking about outcomes, I think it's important to have a perspective on what you want to, the order in which you want to address them, right? That would truly get you to be more consistent, more predictable, more productive, more efficient, incrementally, right? As you set for yourselves on your journey. So again, what you see on your screen are certain outcomes, like what we've realized through our years of experience of doing agile squads, performing scrum teams, co-creating, collaborating solutions. These are, again, it's important to understand that these are more outcomes where you feel like, the organization feels like they've got it right and they've got it perfect. It doesn't necessarily mean these are the sequence in which you kind of work, in a sequential manner. I think that's not the intent or spirit of showing those outcomes. It's about when you say you've measured or conquered that outcome. I think that's really how this ought to be looked at and reviewed at. So again, in our experience, what we've found is very fundamental is getting that cadence right. When you are working with your customers, you're immersing yourself into your customer environment, you are signing up to collaborate, co-create, absolutely critical that you get your process, your cadence, your scrum model, your sprints, your iterations to spot, right? Up to the mark, to a point that it's consistent, it's repeatable, your sprint plans are executed to a script, right? So that's very critical, and that kind of involves working with your customers, getting under, kind of immersing into their culture, adopting their standards, driving that whole business development, ops, collaboration, and so on. And again, most important, right? Baselining certain metrics, yardsticks. So if you're talking velocity, if you're talking user story, if you're talking estimates, so I think that gives a lot of certainty, that gives a lot of confidence to organizations working on Agile, and that is a critical foundational element to build upon, right? And then obviously quality is absolutely critical. I think building that quality culture, that orientation is critical. Now, Agile came in after, I would say, lean, and with the assumption that lean principles, the quality orientation, it's a well-functioning engine, right? Now it just needs to be, it just needs to function. It just needs to now function at a velocity, right, with a certain speed. So I think the built-in quality, the first time right, the quality orientation, good engineering practices, code review, technical debt, that's critical. Followed by how do you truly then start ensuring that you're being efficient, you're having streamlined value streams, you're driving your DevOps practices, automation, seamless, right? You're kind of looking at a whole, then really the parts, because kind of you address your parts fairly well, foundationally right. And last but not the least, it's about high performing, right? How do you kind of then get to a stage where you are continuously increasing your throughput, velocity, doing more with same, you're getting your customer feedback, you're kind of automating that monitoring, the feedback into your value chain, into your product backlog, and so on, right? So I think these are some incremental outcomes. I think that sequence is a little subtle, but kind of, the nuance, the underlying nuance is important to understand. Again, these are building blocks. They have to be arranged, addressed, no shortcuts, unfortunately, but you can definitely accelerate the pace at which you move.
So this indeed is very intriguing, Nikhil. I mean, you said, the speed without the quality only helps, but it also is very interesting on how you laid out the building blocks, like the thought that process orchestration or DevOps alone does not guarantee a successful outcome, and then eliminate the risks involved is quite fascinating. But building a quality culture is so important to increase certainty and chances of successful initiatives. So this is great. I mean, the methodology is intriguing. The need for high agile capability for execution excellence and successfully implementing the methodology is well acknowledged. But as Stefanini and a partner, how do you truly show your commitment in a very tangible term, I guess I should say? How do you reduce or share execution risk with your customers?
Again, doesn't surprise me, Dave, that you asked me that question. I do, and I'm sure a lot on this call, they kind of feel a sense of disillusionment when it comes to Agile, and especially when it comes to engaging partners like us and kind of defining that collaboration model, right? I'm sure quite a few on this call probably haven't experienced what a truly Agile contract really looks like with their partners. Some of us believe, just given the need to be collaborative, to co-create, to kind of own it up. Some of us just believe that it's not possible to engage a partner on a true collaborative, development effort, and I say so more so objectively with defined accountability, right? I think I've seen some, a lot of organizations trade off one at the expense of another. So I've seen quite a few organizations think of a fixed price project with defined requirements, outlined user stories, executed, in a fixed price as kind of an Agile contract, where we all know, I think change is the name of the game when it comes to Agile, and the hassles they run into when user story changes, scope changes, and so on. So that's one extreme we've seen some of organizations try to take. The other extreme is kind of leave it open-ended, without any accountability clearly defined, right? So I think in more than one ways, getting this right, getting the model right, it's more of an art. It's kind of has to be learned through experience than something that can be taught, prescribed. And let me share you what some of those important elements are of kind of doing it successfully, right? So, getting that model right, getting it to execute right, kind of is a fine balancing act. And the first element you got to make sure that stays there is collaboration and co-creation, especially if you're talking digital and Agile, digital transformation. It has to be a collaborative co-creation effort. Like we at Stefanini, co-creating is our mantra. We live and breathe with that philosophy, right? So I think that's an absolute critical element that has to make it to your working model, however which way you choose to define it. The second is innovation. It's innovation on how you build your products. It's innovation on the technology you use to build your products. It's innovation on the solution that you define to build your products. And it's innovation also on the methods that you use to deliver and develop your products. Especially in this fast-paced age, I think innovation is absolutely critical. So however which way you want to, that should be a part of your balancing act. I think you should challenge your partner to bring innovation to the table and have ways to make them accountable to deliver to that innovation. And I talk about accountability, right? I think that's where it becomes absolutely critical. Like collaboration is great, co-creation is great, having expectations on innovation is great. At the end of the day, I think you've got to be able to translate them into some definitive, tangible outcomes that we all can sign up to. So absolutely critical, right? So and last but not the least, flexibility. I think, as I just mentioned, change is the nature of the game. That's the only thing constant in an Agile philosophy and how we ought to approach things. So flexibility is absolutely critical. I think the way you set up your model, you've got to make sure that it's designed to be flexible. It's kind of designed to anticipate and build upon change, kind of incorporate changes as you move along, right? It's designed to ensure that there are no spanners. Changes do not slow you down. And by changes I mean your resourcing changes that might change from one product increment to another, right? Your one product increment can be front end heavy, your second product increment can be a back end heavy. So having that flexibility that gives you the ability to change, adapt, fine tune, I think that's also critical. So if you look at, I think to us, these are like those four critical elements. In a lot of ways, if you think about it, they are kind of, counterintuitive. They are kind of, I shouldn't say opposing, but they're kind of counterbalancing in some ways, right? It's kind of difficult. It's, having accountability and flexibility at the same time. So it can be done, it should be done. And I think we've kind of figured out through experience and working a template to get this done, right? And I think this to us is a critical element or a success factor for an agile model that has to function and function successfully to deliver. It's all about execution risks, right? How do you take risks off your client plates? How do you share risks? And I think what we've learned, and we've kind of been successful in quite a few things, is an approach to precisely address that very specific objective.
Excellent.
If I may add, if I might add really quickly, as I talked about in the very beginning, where we would be communicating with the program level and the portfolio level, you're basically coming out and showing or kind of determining what that major thing that you're trying to accomplish is that aligns directly with your business, right? And why the partnership works so well with Xceleon and Stefanini and the customer is because you guys really kind of hone in on the execution part, right? With these four quadrants and what Nikhil was just speaking to. Well, when you do that execution and you have an understanding from a corporate level, if you will, and from a high level and from a business level of exactly what you're trying to accomplish, then your direction is going to be to enable and technology infrastructure that helps you as a customer and as a business to grow, stabilize, and gain more market share because you have the technology infrastructure that supports your ambitions.
Excellent.
Absolutely. We deliver to what your objectives are. I think translating that into an actionable plan is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that we take that agenda and kind of convert it into a plan that gives you the line of sight of how your objective, your intent is being translated into an actionable plan. And more importantly, with the level of accountability that kind of makes you feel, that gives you that comfort and assurance, right? I think that's critical, especially embarking on such initiatives.
And for me also, it looks like there's a paradigm shift from funding projects to funding outcomes. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly because those initiatives and those outcomes is what the business needs to grow because they understand that, right? They know the business that they're in. They know what they're trying to accomplish in terms of goals, and then helping them to kind of visualize that and plan it out is something that we do very, very well. And then something that you guys do very well at Stefanini is helping to realize that by implementing the technology that supports it.
Exactly. Well, this has been amazing, guys. You guys have, as always, you've been excellent, and the value has been tremendous. I want to see if Amy, are there any questions?
Yes, there are. There's just a couple. So a couple slides back, you spoke about the outcomes-based agile contracts. Can you give us more of an example of that?
Yep. So sure, I'll give you an example where we're kind of doing this for one of our clients. So the model is more set up to be, signing ourselves up for every sprint acceptance. So we kind of, sign up for us. So it's a very collaborative model where if you look at an agile process, a safe process of program, portfolio program and team based. We collaborate when it comes to portfolio planning, your program planning, your PI planning. When it comes to estimating, contributing to estimating the user stories on sprint plans. So when you're getting into a 2-week sprint planning session, we collaborate to, we sign off on. And once we sign off on that sprint plan, we kind of hold ourselves to delivering whatever we sign up to at the end of those 2 weeks, right? So this is a very good functional model, like going back to my point around making collaboration, co-creation, accountability, flexibility work and work all at the same time. So this is a very good example. I think it's becoming a more common model when we talk outcome based model on agile sprints and kind of signing up to certain expectations. Yep, you kind of you collaborate all through the process, but when it comes to execution and delivering to the 2-week sprints and whatever you sign up for, you kind of run with it and you just make sure that you deliver and you hold yourself. So Amy, I would say this is a good example of a model that where we've been able to kind of live up to multiple all of the expectations that we've been discussing last 30-40 minutes or so.
Yeah. And to just extend that as well, when you're talking about the measurements and how the organization benefits from this collaboration, is that you have those 4 quadrants that I spoke of that is standardly measured throughout the entire industry, right? Where you have productivity, and you can kind of look at what the productivity was before we engaged, and then take a look at it, what it is after we have engaged, the quality of the software, the time to market, of course, because you're able to see how more frequently you can get value out of the relationship. And finally, the engagement of your end users. When you take a look at what your end users done before, when they're actually utilizing Excel, they're using things like paper, things outside of an actual system that has been designed to actually do the work or help you to do the work. Now you can really quantify even better, and you can really be more decisive in terms of making decisions about how the business needs to grow. So all of those measurements are available to you because of the standardization and being more efficient with utilizing our collaborative efforts.
Fantastic. Any other questions, Amy?
I think we have time to squeeze in for one more. So what kind of metrics can be used to measure whether or not the Agile project was a success?
I think Craig just alluded to all the measures that we talked about, and Craig was absolutely right. I think important KPIs are around your first time right first time, which means you kind of minimizing your rework, you're minimizing your defects, you're getting your the most important high value user stories, if you may, business value delivered. Important KPI is your improvement in or increase in your sprint velocity. I think that's critical. Again, going back to Craig's point on productivity. So these are again some KPIs which we track, which we measure, which are indicators that tells us that it's kind of all trending in the right direction, gives us good feedback for us to act and improve upon. So bunch of, I mean, everything that just Craig mentioned, alluded to just before your question, Amy, and some KPIs that I just talked about. I think those are all important success indicators for a well-functioning Agile Scrum team, or an Agile Scrum, or an Agile Squads model, however which way you want to call it.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing to keep in mind, guys, when you're thinking about your next project and how you can improve, is that you take a look at Stefanini, one of the best in the business. When you're talking about Agile Squad, Agile functionality delivery, you have access to that, right? And you think about Xceleon, where we can assist with really aligning what your business goals are to what the functionality needs to be from your IT infrastructure. So if you have both of those partners in the mix when you're trying to determine how do I stabilize and how do I grow my business, well, you have a turnkey there, right? Because we can help you to quantify and plan that out from a roadmap perspective, and also what functionality you need in that roadmap. And then with the experience and expertise that Nikhil and teams bring to the table, you can really have an organization that can help you to realize that by following the same agile principles and practices that helps to enable that IT functionality that facilitates that business goal.
And I think too, just to add one caveat that I think also is you provide a certain level of predictability that enhances trust across the entire organization.
Absolutely.
I think that's also huge.
Yep, absolutely huge.
Perfect. I think that will wrap up here. Thank you everyone again for joining. As I mentioned earlier, is that we did record this session and we will be sending out the recording to everyone by the end of today. Thank you again to Nikhil, Dave, and Craig. We hope you enjoyed yourself, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.